we send 3 times more to the G7 than the second highest contributor. At $4.7 billion this year, we send more than 3 times as much as the second largest G7 country. Our country can't pay its bills without making a law that says we can ignore accounting. And yet Biden is going to the G7. It's frustrating how easy it is to find our president working on world affairs and not American affairs. Let's jump into it.
For Japan Wednesday to attend the annual G7 summit in Hiroshima. Leaders are set to discuss issues including the Ukraine war and China. Biden cut his overseas trip short in order to come back to Washington for debt ceiling negotiation. Let's bring in CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. Ed, this trip to the G7, the United States has to show up when the advanced economies are meeting, but does the president have more of an agenda than that, playing the role as president? Is there something he wants out of this meeting, and is that going to be possible given what's going on with the debt ceiling back in Washington?
John, they would see this as a real opportunity to demonstrate that this is a president who can do more than one thing at once. And at a time when there are questions about his agility and his ability, frankly, to manage the economy and foreign affairs, they're hoping that he can come out of this demonstrating that the Western world, at least, or the world's biggest economies and their close friends are closely aligned on a series of things. They pointed out today, the president did and aides did on his way out of town, that he will be in touch with congressional leaders as needed on the phone, that his team will be in close contact with them back here in Washington on the domestic front. But in the next few days, there'll be big conversations about Ukraine, about countering China, about dealing with more pressing and modern issues like the threat of AI. And they hope, at least, that he can emerge from this looking as someone who's still in command of foreign affairs and certainly looking out for America's interests.
Right. As president, you don't get to pick just one thing to focus on. So presidents don't actually do the nitty-gritty of negotiating. You know, they come in as the closer. But the White House has said there will be members of his top staff that will be in charge of negotiations. What White House objective is lost by the president not going to Australia and Papua New Guinea, which are the parts of his trip that he cut short?
3 words: China, China, China.
So you're saying China?
The whole point of this trip, absent the G7, was to reinforce that the United States is remaining and seeking to remain a big power and influence in the Pacific. And that Australia especially needs to be buttressed and buoyed by allies like the United States and the United Kingdom. Remember, there's been this nuclear-powered submarine agreement with Australia that ticked off the French a few years ago. Part of this was to reinforce that agreement. There's this emerging group called the Quad, which involves the United States, India, Australia, and Japan, meant to counter the rise of China or the influence of China in that region. There's growing concern that China especially is trying to expand its naval assets to those countries, is building roads and bridges through its infrastructure program in that part of the world, and then sending military assistance as well, and in some cases bolstering what are essentially autocracies, which is exactly what President Biden doesn't want to happen.
Ed, on the G7 and China, how unified are the member nations of the G7 when it comes to this U.S. effort to counter China?
It was notable that the National Security Advisor was reinforcing that every one of those 7 has their own unique relationship with China and needs to do something to sustain it. But what they hope the summit will demonstrate is that on certain key issues, economic, national security, or military, there will be some statement of resolve by these big economies that while they understand China needs to exist, China's going to have to play by rules that are a little more amenable and friendly to everybody else. So China will be closely watching this, is probably pleased the president isn't making it to Australia, but understands that the 7 economies meeting in Japan is a signal that they take them pretty seriously and are working together against them.
Ed O'Keefe in Washington. Thanks so much, Ed.
I'm sure at least a good percentage of you watching this know of a family that just kept lying about their situation and overspending until one day they're homeless. They're without anything. This is what America is doing right now, except for we're overspending. Our president does not need to go look strong in other countries. Our president doesn't need to look like he can multitask. Our president needs to actually accomplish something. And by the way, if you actually listen to the president, he says the biggest thing holding us back is white supremacy. We don't make anything in America. We give all of our money away to other countries. We give all of our weapons away to other countries. And we're doing that by printing dollars and increasing our debt. America seems to be playing the part of a battery, and it's just going to power the global economy. And I think they're going to leave us dead. No, I don't think the solution is to leave the country. I think the solution is to stop bickering about the idea that there are more than two genders. We don't need identity politics. We need production stateside. We need to work. We need to produce. Even in a world of AI, you have no idea how many things still exist in the real world that we just get shipped in. We need to start making those things here. If we're going to use China, let's use them to buy CNC machines. Let's use them to buy 3D printers. Let's use them to figure out how to do micro-manufacturing in America, because if the whole world turns against us, we will be so poor without imports. We need to shore up our own shores. Growing up genuinely believing that the Democratic Party was looking out to help me, and now as an adult seeing that they only want to either look like they're being a good person or help the world at a self-sacrifice level, that they don't get the right to do that to the American people. When I hear things like this, I think now more than ever, we should default on our debt. It's going to get worse. This ends one of two ways. We either run our debt up so high that they no longer accept it, or we stop lying about our situation and stop paying the bills with money we don't have. Both of these are going to be hard on America. But let me ask yourself, anytime that you've been in a breakup, which one hurt more? The breakup that you chose, or the breakup that was chosen upon you? We can't let the world decide that our currency is not valid because we've printed so much, acting like we can pay our bills. I think we should stand up, say we can't afford it, and let's start figuring it out from there. That is the strong foot, admitting where you're at, not lying about it. I'm more patriotic than I am proud to be an American, but this is the only land that actually has documentation based on individual rights, private property, in the free exchange of goods and services. No matter how much the federal government wants to pollute that, this country, it was born on those principles, and it will die without them. I hope you learned something. Thanks for watching. This is Tristan with Radically Rational Radio. Like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you in the next episode. Stay resilient.